Ladies and gentlemen, it's occurred. Like we said, we've come down on Bitcoin to the bottom of the ascending wedge formation. I'm giving you an update video today, what we should expect next and what this breakout has entailed. So Bitcoin now has kind of moved downwards below 69k. The last time we spoke about Bitcoin was up here in this candle. We said that the next move would be a short-term move to the bottom of the wedge. I did say that from that point, I wouldn't necessarily know where Bitcoin is going to go because it's going to rely on things like the 12-hourly chart triangle on the RSI, which we'll look into in a second. But our first target realistically has been reached. The bottom of the wedge has been retested. It was very simple, in my opinion, that Bitcoin was going to go back down there. We were looking, for example, at how this wedge was playing out in relation to the 12-hourly chart RSI triangle, and we noticed very clearly that on every single retest of the triangle's bottom, we would test the retest of the wedge's bottom. So this triangle was kind of acting as a validation point for the retest of the top and bottom of the wedge. We saw a rejection from the top of the triangle. From that point, we said a retest to the bottom of the wedge is likely because that's a natural trajectory after a rejection. I saw no real proper bullish narrative coming up because we have the halving in 6 days, of course, but we know for a fact that the halving is not necessarily a short-term bullish narrative for Bitcoin. It's a long-term bullish narrative. We know that because if we look at the historical price trends for Bitcoin, and we look at when the halvings have occurred. We saw a halving, for example, in November 2012. It took about a month and a half before Bitcoin actually started moving upwards. If we look at 2016 July, we actually went downwards for a period of time before moving upwards about 100 days later. And then if we look at 2020, you can see in May 2020, we went sideways for months on end before finally moving upwards. So the halving is a good macro data point, but it's not exactly a bullish short-term narrative. And I didn't really see any immediate short-term bullish narratives forming. So I said, bottom of that wedge is going to be retested. Now we've got to that point. We actually went below it, broke down from the wedge briefly, but currently I would say that's a fake out. I still think the wedge is acting as a valid structure because we've actually closed our 12-hourly candle within the wedge's bounds, even though we dropped below it on the shorter term charts. And on something like the 4-hourly chart, for example, it might look very, very messy. That's why I'm encouraging people to zoom out here. I think that even on the 4-hourly chart, where we did break below this wedge very clearly, you can see two very clear 4-hourly candle closes testing that wedge line for resistance and then getting back above it. So right now, I wouldn't say we're in a breakdown actively. I would actually say that Bitcoin right now is stabilized for now. Stabilized at the bottom of that wedge. I would say that wick to the downside is actually not a bad sign at all. What I would say as well is that we've actually tested this 12-hourly chart RSI triangle for support right now. The last time we did that, we have to remember, we saw a bounce from that level. So it actually is within the realm of possibility for Bitcoin to bounce upwards from here. That is definitely something that could happen. At the same time, of course, there is the likelihood that Bitcoin is just showing massive weakness and it could break down from this triangle formation. Ultimately, I'm going to say that where Bitcoin goes next relies on the RSI breakouts. I still think that to be the case. I said that I was confident Bitcoin would retest the bottom of the wedge because we were still within the RSI triangle itself, and that's the only prediction I was willing to make at the time. But until we see a breakout of this 12-hourly chart RSI or a breakout of the daily chart RSI on Bitcoin, which is also on support right now, until we see a breakout down or up, and the same thing of 12-hourly chart RSI, I'm not going to be willing to say that Bitcoin's going to be moving in any particular direction. All I'm going to say right now is that Bitcoin is currently sitting on a support zone. It's currently stabilized on that support zone. It is under threat. It is certainly on the edge of a cliff, and it's certainly on thin ice. I think mainly, as I said, the main things we need to be looking at right now, perhaps, yeah, short-term candle closes like the 4-hourly chart. If we drop back below that wedge, it's a very bad sign. But if we really start edging below this triangle on a 12-hour candle and we close below it, that's going to be a very bad sign. That's going to be Bitcoin very clearly targeting something like 61.2k, which is the monthly candle resistance zone. If we move to the monthly chart, you can very well see that very easily. So if we drop below the wedge, just to clarify, which can be confirmed by short-term price movements of a 12-hourly RSI close, the next target for Bitcoin is going to be a test of 61.2k. Which is, as you can see, the monthly candle all-time high in 2021. We tested it again here in 2024 February. Point is, it could get quite bad. It could get quite messy because that would be a drop, from this current price region of another 9%. And we know how massively hard altcoins have been hit on the drop down from 71k. We've seen altcoins down 20%, 30%, some of them even down 35%. So that could get brutal. But overall, as I said, looking at the short-term price charts in relation to this wedge, looking at the 12-hourly chart RSI, the daily chart RSI, Ultimately as well, I think another thing we need to be looking at quite clearly is the weekly chart. The weekly candle's closing in 1 day and 14 hours, okay? And if that weekly candle closes below 69K, Bitcoin will be in trouble, okay? And it will be in trouble because we know the weekly candle close is based off the support line on the weekly candle is based off the 2021 all-time high. We zoom across, we see that red line, that red level is where we rejected from quite strongly in March. It's where we found support here last week, and right now we're hovering back below it. That's not a good sign at all. And if we zoom into the weekly chart RSI, which of course is heavily connected to this level, we also see that we have a weekly chart ascending wedge formation. And right now, we are hovering below that wedge, right? And if we close where we are right now on the weekly chart in 1 day and 14 hours, we will be breaking down from this ascending wedge formation. And that is an ascending wedge formation that's been forming since September last year, okay? Since Bitcoin was down in the 20K region, okay? That would lead to a breakdown of a massive breakdown, really. A breakdown that could take us down all the way to 53K. Okay, that's the simple reality. 53K, 57.5K, something like that. That's the reality, right? So Bitcoin right now, on the weekly chart, is facing a threat that's quite major. Now, would it destroy the macro structure? Would it destroy the bull market? Not necessarily, no. Because the bull market, in my opinion, is intact until we lose 53K or even 49K. But it would do major damage to your positions. Major damage. We're talking 40%, 50%, okay? So it could be a very, very scary time to be holding bags. That is not confirmed yet. We will discuss that when or if it is confirmed. Right now, we need to be focusing on these short-term charts, the 12-hourly chart, RSI, daily chart. Again, if we do see a breakdown from this wedge, which right now is stabilized for support, we will be at risk of a much larger medium-term correction that could last a month, okay? And could drag us down quite a bit. Another thing we need to be looking at is this long term. Okay, this is a 13-year long support line on Bitcoin. If you zoom in, you can see this line is not perfect with accuracy, but it's vaguely been retested in support and tested quite well. It's been respected very well over the decade, basically more than a decade. And right now that line currently stands, all right, at around 57.5K, 58K, okay, 56, something like that, okay? We could go downwards and test that line. That would be very feasible. And then we can go upwards from there. In fact, if we're looking at price cycles, we see that we test that line pretty often. Every time we've broken it, really, we come back down and we test it after breaking it. Okay, so it wouldn't be abnormal at all to test that line. Again, I'm just supporting the case that even though right now we are on the edge of a cliff and we are perhaps approaching pretty scary territory, and you may see a situation in which your bags are down quite massively, I don't think it's bad macro-wise. I don't think the macro triggers have occurred to make this market bearish yet. I still think the market is in a bullish position. I still think the market is in a good position on a macro scale. It's just the medium-term, short-term charts that are worrying me a little bit. Total cryptocurrency market cap's in the exact same position as Bitcoin, except it has broken its wedge downwards. You could go ahead and change how you draw the wedge. You could draw it like this, for example, in which case it hasn't. Or you could just do the logical thing and look at the RSI triangle, which is much more prevalent, much more interesting, okay? And you see that the RSI triangle on the 12-hourly chart, total cryptocurrency market cap, is in a very similar position than what it's in on Bitcoin right now. You could say it's broken down. You could say it was like that. Perhaps it's an argument you could be making. Right now, I would say, because you can change the way you draw this wedge, you can draw it like this, for example. I would say that right now it's not necessarily broken down yet, but it could be breaking down quite soon. Really, it is one of those situations where it's a bit of like a who knows. It's just something we're going to have to react to rather than predict. So again, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm sitting here saying, I've told you what's going to happen in the short term. It's happened. Now we need to wait for the trigger. Are we going to see a downside trigger that's going to send Bitcoin down to 61K, potentially 57.5K? That is the next question. When we see that downside trigger, if we see that downside trigger, we will be able to confirm it within a few hours. So it's just a situation which you're going to need to react rather than predict. There's no point predicting here. Bitcoin's stabilized on support. You can't make a prediction from this point, in my opinion. You can react to the triggers when they occur. And I think there is a very real possibility they could occur. They just have not happened yet. So very kind of tricky situation for Bitcoin to be in. Certainly on the edge of a cliff, certainly on thin ice. We're just going to have to monitor it. Right? We're going to have to monitor these triangles, these wedges. We're going to have to monitor the weekly candle and just be prepared because, this could get rough. But I don't think this is necessarily, even if it does, I don't think it will be necessarily detrimental for the macro structure. The macro structure, in my opinion, is still intact. Halving's coming up in 6 days. A lot of things to watch out for this week. In my opinion, this is the most important week for Bitcoin of the entirety of this year for sure, and potentially even more than that. So very interesting week. I'll keep you guys updated. Come back to the YouTube channel. Watch these videos. You're going to need to see them. Got big things to discuss soon, by the way. Bitcoin dominance has made a massive move, and that's broken a very, very major resistance zone. I'll talk about that tomorrow or the next day, so keep an eye out for that as well. Guys, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you appreciate the content here today, very insightful stuff, go ahead and check out the BingX and BitGet exchanges. The two exchanges I refer on this YouTube channel, my referral links are down below. You can click on those links, sign up to these exchanges, get a 15% trading fee discount with my link. Help out the channel, help out yourself. Get an exchange with low trading fees that has never been hacked before. Both these exchanges are golden. Check them out. Then we've got Crypto Academy Bull Market Sale. If you want to learn how to trade and analyze charts as I do, you can do so with the Crypto Academy's Become a Trader 10-unit course. You can also check out the VIP group on Telegram. We do altcoin trading signals on VIP there. So check that out. Altcoin trading signals, 77.51% win rate. Very good stuff. Three quarters of trades reaching profits there. Very profitable, very good stuff. Group chat is also included in the membership for discussing with members about the market, etc. 24/7. So check that out. Guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you tomorrow.